You're listening to a podcast of Master Your Finances with me, Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. on 1077thebronx.com. Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I'm Kurt Baker, certified financial planner professional, located in Princeton, New Jersey. I can be reached through our website, which is www.cwmi.us, or you can call me directly at 609-716-4700. This week, we're very pleased to have with us John Odalen, who is a professional organizer, author, and productivity coach. John started his business, Organize and Maintain, in 2014, and is a member of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. He published his first book, Real Value, New Ways to Think About Your Time, Your Space, and Your Stuff, in 2016. A longtime Lawrenceville resident, John graduated from the College of New Jersey with a degree in mathematics and spent the first part of his career as a customer support and quality assurance manager for a major software company. Well, that's pretty fascinating, John. I have to tell you, I'm not sure how you got from a degree in mathematics at TC&J to becoming a professional organizer, but I guess if you have I guess you do math, you have to be organized, right? And I think this is a skill that a lot of us work on, and many of us, including myself, feel like we aren't quite to the level we'd like to be at. We'd love to be much more organized, because when you're organized, things really seem to work out better. How did you actually start to have a passion for this and then get into this as far as the profession itself goes? How did you get started in all this?
Oh, well, Kurt, thank you for having me here. I've always been organized. Definitely was organized during my software career. And then in 2013, I was laid off and was looking for different opportunities. And I've always thought about becoming a professional organizer. And I figured that was a perfect time to try the waters and start my own business. You know, I'd been helping friends and family get organized before that, and figured let's try to make a career out of it.
I'm envisioning, I know people that are like naturally very organized. It sounds like you're one of them, and it really frustrates them when other people aren't. Because I know at home you'll often have different levels of organization, right? So one person's like, quote, putting the ketchup away, and the next person doesn't, you're like getting annoyed at it, right? So that's just a minor item. But if you do that on a major scale where things just don't get put back to where they need to be, I know this is interesting. There's a place for everything and everything in its place, so to speak. You hear that a lot when you're younger. I know I used to hear that a lot, and your parents were always trying to stress to you. But I guess from my perspective, how do you? One thing I'm always motivated by personally when you organize. I realize if I'm organized, I'm actually saving a lot of time overall. So I'm thinking out loud. It's like say I'm doing something, I don't know, in the kitchen, right? So if you start doing a process and you don't finish it and you say, well, I'll come back and take care of that later, there's almost like this startup energy that you're like starting a whole new project. Whereas if you just do it all at the same time, you actually, in my opinion, you save a little bit of time, right? And then you don't have to think about it anymore. The stress level to me drops off. Oh. I mean, because there's a lot of psychology involved in this, right? So what are kind of your thoughts about the basics of this stuff?
Well, it's definitely a lot of psychology about it. When I'm working with clients, it's 50%, hands-on organizing, but then a lot of it's coaching, because you're changing people's personal habits and changing their behaviors. So definitely saving time is a big reason why people want to get organized, because whether it's, you're looking for something that you have but you can't find, or, who has to clean up before they can clean their kitchen, or you have to clean your desk before you can actually jump into doing your work. It definitely aids productivity if you're more organized and you have what you need to do your job.
I agree, and I think and I'm thinking out loud, because I think even though I try to be pretty organized at work, you have days where you're really, really busy and things just pile up on you, right? And you're like, wow, I just ran out of time to, I know time. There are definitely times in my life where things break down, right? The process breaks down because you're trying to, quote, run your little system where you're taking care of everything so it doesn't pile up on you. But I mean, so. Like, how do you really do this, I guess, is the basic idea, because if sometimes you feel like there's just so much to do that you're never going to get it all done, and it just becomes overwhelming. So I guess start us from the beginning.
About it, because some people think I don't have enough time to get organized. But if you think about kind of your life and your business as a machine, you have to take the time to maintain it. You wouldn't not, put gas in your car or get the oil changed. You may prolong it a little bit, but if you don't do that maintenance, it's going to grind to a halt. So
Right.
you have to consider kind of a non-negotiable that, if you get to that point of every week, maybe you need to spend 15 minutes reorganizing your office, filing the papers, making your to-do list, putting everything away. Because if you don't, it's just going to bite you in the end.
Yeah, I have to say that actually allotting time for it is important, and I actually do that in my own life. Is I set aside certain hours during the week that I'm just going to focus on making sure that everything's the way it's supposed to be. Um, so I think that's fascinating. So how do you start somebody off where, I mean, we've all seen shows like, Hoarders, and we all know people where it kind of gets to that point where it's just overwhelming, right? It's like, even if you brought so John, I know a lot of people like at a home, sometimes things get a little overwhelming. I know over the years, like some people like you've heard when they have to move, part of the big stress of moving is they have to start purging everything, right? When in reality, we really should be taking care of this as we go along. I mean, everybody, many people, you'll end up with, clothes from like you haven't even seen, because you'll buy new clothes and put them in front, but you won't really purge the old stuff. And before you know it, you've got 2 or 3 times as much stuff in your closet than you really need. And that can get out of hand. So how do we kind of start where things are really, really overwhelming, where, it's almost like you'd have to bring in a professional crew to really help you do it? That's part of it, I think, is that sometimes people are like, this is just too big of a job. How do I even like take care of it? Because even if I clean up one area, it's going to look like I did nothing. Right.
I totally get that. People always say, they feel overwhelmed about where to start, and then they reach the breaking point where they realize they have to do something. And sometimes they've waited a little too long. And like you said, if someone needs to move, I said, if you needed to move in a month, what would that look like, having to go through your entire house? So we really want to start early and kind of do it often. When people are feeling overwhelmed, I tell them just to start small. Set actual goals of, say, maybe for this month, I'm going to just work on the kitchen, because that would be an immediate impact and where daily life is affected the most. And then just give small goals of, maybe I'll say every day I'll just spend 10 or 15 minutes decluttering one cabinet or one drawer. And eventually those little bits will add up and you will see an accomplishment. And as you are working at it, you will feel better about yourself and you'll feel productive. So even if you say, I'm only going to do 10 minutes, it may turn into a half hour. I use that trick if you're going to the gym. I don't really like going to the gym. I'll just go and do a little bit of cardio. But once you getting there is the hard part, then you'll kind of do a full workout.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, without that analysis, because I've had that experience myself where I'm like, okay, let me go through and just, I don't know, reorganize the drawers in the kitchen or something. You start doing one thing, I'll just do one drawer. And before you know it, you've done them all, because you're like, wow, that was not so bad. That didn't really take that much time. You took everything out, did what you had to do, put it back, and that was it, right? It actually doesn't necessarily have to take as much time as you think. And I think the other idea is you start with one place and do the one that has the most impact. Of course, the kitchen is great because that's kind of an area that we all use, right? So the whole family is going to benefit from you taking care of the kitchen, right? So if you clear the kitchen up a little bit, everybody's going to feel better about it.
Yeah,
right?
Biggest impact, or what you may see as the easiest. Where is the area where you think it's going to be easier for you to make decisions and throw things out? Maybe paperwork or mementos or books, that's going to be harder for you, or even clothes. Do what's easiest. And the other thing to think about is it doesn't have to all be done at once. Don't think about the basement as one big chore. Maybe it's, holiday decorations in the basement to start, or, tools or sporting gear. Break it up into small manageable chunks and just set yourself goals of, my end goal is to get this done by the end of the summer. How do I need to split that up?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Because even if you're working on like your desk and you clear off the desk, then you can work on one other point, right? So you just clear off as much as you can, and then you move some of that stuff you're not really sure what to do with. And we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about something you touched on, is you're going to come across mementos and papers and things like that. You're not really sure, can I toss it? Do I want to keep it? I really like this. But we get a lot of stuff over over a long period of time, and at some point we have to decide what we're going to really keep and what we're not going to keep. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurt Baker here with John Odalen, and we're talking about getting organized, which I think is one of those things that a lot of people aspire to, but when it comes down to doing it, they start to feel overwhelmed, and then they're like, well, it's just too much work. I'm just not going to do it, right? But as John pointed out, it's key to really kind of start small and do some of those high value things to start with, right? And that way you feel better about yourself. And even if you start off saying, hey, I'm going to spend just 10 to 15 minutes periodically taking care of whatever, like the kitchen or something, you may be surprised, and that might end up into like, in half an hour, because you're actually feeling good about it. You're enjoying it because you're seeing results, right? And another thing you touched on, John, I think we should talk a little bit about is when you're going through cleaning out your house, especially those of us who've been in a house for many, many years. I'm going on almost 3 decades now. So once you've been there a long time, you just have this tendency for things to accumulate and things that you really like, right? Maybe stuff that the kids made, or maybe stuff that you got as a gift. This starts to become quite a bit of stuff. And when you're cleaning things up and you're trying to reduce how much you have, how do you kind of go through that process of deciding, what am I going to keep, and like, what am I going to get rid of?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts about getting organized. People struggle with that because it's easy for us to do nothing. We fill all of the space in our home. So we just kind of keep until it kind of reaches the breaking point. So the term that I use is right sizing. We think about downsizing when you're going from a physical space to a smaller space. But with right sizing, what is the right amount of stuff for the life you're living right now? So when you're looking at all of your items, and again, I suggest doing this in categories with, clothing, kitchen gear, sporting goods, whatever, I want you to ask 3 questions about an item. Is it something that I need? Is it something that I use? Or is it something that I love? And if you can't answer yes to all 3 of those questions, you have to wonder, why am I keeping it, and should I be getting rid of it? And that doesn't have to mean trash. I mean, just getting it out of your home. Because there are things that we need to keep, we may not use very often. There are things that we use regularly. And then there are some things that we really love and they bring us joy, and then we want to keep those. If it doesn't fit into those categories, why do we need that? The example that I use with clients is, consider your wardrobe. Wouldn't it be great if when you went to get dressed in the morning, every piece of clothing that you pulled out fit you well and looked good on you? Why are you keeping the clothes that don't fit, that have a tear? Even if it's a perfectly good shirt, but you don't like it, you're not going to like it next week or next month. So if you're not using it or needing it and loving it, whittle down your wardrobe to just what you love and wear. How much easier would it be to get dressed in the morning? Saving you some time, saving you energy of, I have to find something to wear. Just pull something out and it works. And that can apply to any category of item in your house.
So clothing, I think, is an interesting one because, we all had clothes that we really, really like. And they were like, if you really think about it, I may not have worn it for like years, 3, 4, 5 years, right? In some cases. But we really like it. So we're like, well, maybe that'll come back. Maybe one day I'm going to wear it. Maybe one day it'll come back in style. Or if I gained a little weight, maybe I'll lose a little weight and I'll fit back into it, things like that. So how do we work our way through the psychology of thinking that at some point, for some reason or another, even though I'm not really needing it now, I might need it in the future. So I don't want to buy it again in 6 months or a year.
There's no hard and fast rules, and it's all relative to your personal situation. If some people go between sizes, and one option may be, if you have clothes in a larger size, pack those up in a storage container and put them out of your closet until you reach that size. And then maybe say, if I don't get back to that size in 2 years, then I can donate them. It's all about setting rules and guidelines as you're going through. Maybe you say that you're only going to keep enough clothes that fit in your closet and your dresser. That's your physical limit. So if you only have room for 10 sweaters, but you actually have 30, as you're going through your purging and you're organizing, you're going to pick the 10 that you really love the most.
Yeah, no, I like that because that's a struggle that I did purge my closet out about a year or 2 ago. I guess it's been almost 2 years. And there were like some old suits in there, and there was some old clothes, things that I really liked, but I really I had a day of honesty, I'll call it, right? Where I was like, am I really going to wear this again? And I finally said, no, I'll probably just get another suit because I haven't worn it in 5 or 6 or 7 years at that point. And things have changed a little bit. My size was a little different, things like that. Right. So I was like, look, if I really get back to that particular size of that suit, it's like a reward almost, right? To me, it was at least. And then you can just donate it, right? And you get a tax deduction for it.
Yes. And someone who needs that suit can use it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. I like that. Well, and that's one thing I like. I know one of the things that we struggled with, like giving away some of the stuff from our children, is they really liked it. They loved it. We're like, look, they've outgrown it, right? They don't need it anymore. They're never going to use it again. But there's another child out there somewhere that we can donate it to, and then we're going to know that they're going to get enjoyment out of it. I think that for our children's stuff really helped a lot to feel like it was going somewhere positive.
That's one of the ways that it kind of helps people let go of things that they think are sentimental or family items. You know, how many people of a certain generation have, full service china sets, and their children do not want them. They've said they don't want them. They think, oh, well, maybe when they get a little older, they'll want them. And then you're just leaving it for them so that when you pass, they have to deal with your stuff. So understand what they're saying, and then maybe you could find someone now who would treasure it. Or maybe you could sell it and then use that money for something to bring you enjoyment. So it's really about having that conversation about your stuff and what are you going to do with it, who's going to take care of it, who wants it to find the best home for it.
Well, yeah, I think you just brought up a great point, is that when people talk about estate planning and things like that, a lot of times adults, older adults, those of us in our 50s, 60s, 70s or more, are thinking, wow, I got this great stuff that I bought. They don't make it like this anymore. Et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of that's true, but you really have to talk to your children and say, are you going to actually want this? Because younger generations aren't really into kind of the styles and the large furniture and things like that older people thought, at the time it was very expensive, this stuff, right? You bought it for a lifetime. You literally bought it thinking, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life in some cases. And that's really not the way it's done anymore, right? I mean, the tastes are different. Lifestyles are different. They're in smaller homes and things like that. They don't want a big piece of furniture there. So having conversations about, these things that we think as adults our children are going to want, they may not necessarily want it. They may think the first thing I'm going to do if something happens, I'm going to get rid of it.
Totally. And there's two points that come into that. One is, depending upon the timing, they may have to sell everything in the home if they need to move to a smaller place or a senior facility. And then they have to kind of take pennies on the dollar or pay someone to clear out a home. And that could cost money. Whereas if they thought about it up front, maybe be able to sell it and get it to someone who's going to enjoy it instead of just going into a dumpster. The other point is that I've heard many clients, baby boomer age, that they've had to tackle their parents' homes. And after doing it, saying, I am not going to leave this same situation for my children. Because they know what of a hardship and it's time consuming to deal with all that stuff. They don't want to leave it for their children when that time comes. So the earlier you can start talking about your stuff, who wants it, coming up with a plan, even if it's, you're not going to be moving for 5 years, figure out that large furniture of who's going to want it. Should we start selling it now, selling the collectibles, the heirlooms, figure out who in the family is going to keep those things that you really want to keep instead of having a battle or a fight at the end.
Yeah, I think the collectible one's another interesting one because sometimes a lot of the old things that we used to collect, we might be surprised at the value. We're thinking they're worth quite a bit of money. And I remember looking up, I used to travel overseas, and I bought some like first and second cut like Hummels and things like that. And I think, oh, wow, they're going to be worth a lot of money someday. And they're worth some money, don't get me wrong, but it's like they're not necessarily worth what you think they're worth. So,
no, I can relate.
So you have to look it up, right? If you think you have an heirloom that's worth a lot of money, you might want to actually do a little research. You might be surprised. It may not be worth exactly what you think it's worth. Oop.
Totally.
So I think that helps put it into some context as far as
one thing that I've learned is that people should be only collecting for enjoyment, not for profit, because most of the things that are collectible, even if things are marked collectible, they're probably so mass produced that they're not going to be worth a lot of money. I had one client who was collecting kind of first day issue stamps that was sent to her house with her name and, address stamped on them. And she was paying probably $14, $15 each. When she went to sell them, she got like $1 or $2 each because there's just no market for them.
Oh my goodness!
If
Wow.
it brought her joy, that's great, but it's not an investment. So the longer time you have
Yeah, no,
to try and sell a collection, the better off you are.
Yeah, and I think it's good to go through, as we said, it's just if you really think you're keeping stuff because you think it has a very high value, you might want to spend a little bit of time and actually determine what that current value is, because some things that our generation, older, people, I'm in my late 50s, so things that we used to think were going to be long-term, like good investments that you just hold on to in your house, you just do that because our parents did that. It's really just not the case necessarily anymore. We have an antique grandfather clock that's over 200 years old. And you would think, wow, that's worth a lot of money, right? And it's worth money, but nowhere near what we had thought it was worth. So it's much more of a sentimental value because it was in our great grandfather's cabin years ago, and that's it, right? And that it's really just it's a family thing. It has nothing to do with really the value, the pure intrinsic value of it, so to speak. Somebody else is going to be like, well, whatever, right? We like it, but they're going to care less about it.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think that's important. So when we come back, I think one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with, even in this day of electronic, paperless, quote unquote, is how do you process all that data and information that we have, and how do you take care of all that paperwork that might be piling up and make sure you're not throwing out something that you actually need. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with John Odalen, and we're talking about getting organized. And part of that organization is to be kind of honest about your property and what the valuation is. As far as from a personal standpoint, are you actually using that paperwork? The items, do you need the item, and do you love the item? So if you can't say yes to all three of those, John's recommendation is it may be something you want to get rid of. Another thing we talked about is the fact that there's a lot of objects and things that we own that we are expecting to give to our children or our grandchildren, but they may not even want them. So, and they may not have the value that we think it has. So you might want to have an honest conversation with your children or grandchildren, whoever you think they're allocated to make sure they actually want them. And also just to get a real idea of the value. It's very easy in most cases to get an appraisal or at least some kind of rough idea of what some of this stuff is worth. If you have old collectibles and Chinaware and things like that, you can probably look it up and find out roughly what it's actually worth, and then decide what you want to do with it. And if it's really something you like but don't really need, just give it to somebody or an organization that might actually get some use out of it, so that you feel a little bit better about where it's going, that there's somebody else down the line that actually will appreciate it and might get some use out of it. And before the break, I know, being a financial planner, we're always talking about planning and organizing and, as far as the finances go. And a big part of that, of course, is managing the paperwork aspect of this, right? There's a lot of stuff that comes in our home. A lot of it, more of it, I guess, is electronic these days. So what are your thoughts about just the sheer amount of data, information, paperwork, even if it's electronic? How do you organize that coming in? And then we also got the other, I guess, what ties into that is whether or not do you get a paper statement or do you get a paperless statement? What are your thoughts about that stuff?
Again, that's an individual choice, because some people are just more comfortable with paper, especially with paying bills and getting reminders. I always advocate go paperless as much as you can. And then when you're thinking about with the paper, what to keep, you really need to think about how long do I need to keep something and what would I need it for? And could I get it some other way? If your utility bill, if you get your utility bill and it looks okay, and then you get the next one and you've paid it and they've showed your credit, do you need to keep that utility bill? What would be the reason that you would need it? And couldn't you just go online and get it if you did need it? For something like that, that may be a way to go paperless versus maybe some of your credit card bills, you want to keep paper, bank statements, stuff like that. But again, we're not going to implement a system if it's fighting your personal nature. It's similar with calendars where I tell people, have you thought about using an electronic calendar? No, I feel much better writing it down because I remember it and it feels good in my hand. Then go with it, because don't fight your nature. But with paper, there's so much paper that's coming in the suggestion is to eliminate as much as possible that doesn't need to come in. And then once it comes into your home, whether it's your inbox or through the mail, have a strategy to process it, and then don't keep, looking back at it. So I give my clients the kind of priority of, when your mail comes in, set aside a time to review it, whether it's every day, every week, and then you have to take action once you open it. So when something comes in, either it's junk mail going in the trash shredder, it's something you have to act upon, and that can be set aside, or it's something you want to file, and that can be set aside. So that you've now streamlined it to your filing category, which can happen later, or these are the things you need to act on. Maybe it's twice a month you're paying your bills, and it only has that small pile versus that whole large mess. We call it clutter creep. Everyone has a kitchen table or a center island, starts off with some paper, and then some receipts fall in there, and then it just goes growing into a mound of larger and larger and larger. For your paper, if you're using basket or a bin, just to keep that important, these are the bills I have to pay, the invitations to follow up on, things to return. This is my action box. When you have to do your paperwork or your home business stuff, it's a smaller box to look through.
Oh yeah, I agree with that, and yeah, you're just bringing back some memories of some of the things that I've tried to do. As an example, when I pick up, matter of fact, I agree with 100%. As much as I can get electronically, I try to get electronically because personally, I'm comfortable with that, and I prefer to look things. I can look things up online and pull it off, and I'm comfortable with that. Whereas my wife doesn't like that. She would much rather have a hard copy of everything, and that just works for her. No matter how much I've tried to convince her that it might be a good idea to start using a calendar that's electronic, because then she can share it with people and things like that. That's just not her nature, and that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But there are things that she searches and gets that are shared. So she gets that data, and then she'll write it on her calendar. So she kind of has a backup. So she's got a little bit of electronic, but mostly hard copy as far as that goes. And that works for her. She likes walking around with it. She likes making notes. And I agree that's just the way it works for her. And then when you come in, like from the post, I know my father does the same thing. Is it when you come in from like the mailbox, or if you're at the post office, I know the first thing that I do is I take that stack and I just start throwing everything out, that I don't need. So I usually walk out with about 20 to 30% of what actually came through the mailbox, and then the things that are actually really, really important, like, maybe a check or maybe, an important statement of some kind, those are going to go in a very specific folder, that's going to get processed through the bank, so to speak. And then another thing that I discovered is sometimes I think, I know at one point I tried to detail everything out too much. Like when I pulled receipts, I would try to categorize all my receipts immediately. And then when I decided, I said, look, how often I actually go back and look at my receipts is fairly rare. So I actually just put them all in one place. So there's just one little place that everything goes. So if I never need to access it, I literally have my receipts categorized by year. So if I need to go back to 2019, there's going to be a big stack of them. But on that rare occasion I need to do it, it actually doesn't take that much time to go through every single one of them to find that one receipt that I actually need a hard copy of for some reason or another. That's just something that I've personally learned.
Yeah, it's something that I recommend to my clients as well. You've kind of made a small improvement. You don't have to file all those receipts, but if you needed to find something, it'll maybe take you 5-10 minutes to go through one box,
right,
versus all of your paperwork. So if you make bigger categories, some people have more medical bills and paperwork. Maybe they need a bin or a box or a binder just for that. Don't worry about completely organizing it, because if you need to find something in there, you can, and it's not, okay, where is it in my whole home office? No one's really going to set up a complete filing system like you would have in a business. So as long as we have categories and smaller subsections, it'll suit your purposes, and you'll find what you need if you need it.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point too, is the medical bills. One thing I discovered several years ago was that you can actually get print-offs of all your medical information, like from the pharmacy and things like that, which I was like pleasantly surprised when I heard that, because I used to keep all these things, every single prescription, every single thing that came in. And I do keep them to some degree, but I'm not as worried about it, because just at the end of the year, if I need my medical information, I just request the printout of everything that we've spent. So you have the total of everything right there. Right. And most insurance companies track it as well. So there's a couple of ways to get some of this stuff that's significantly easier. Then, as you pointed out, you want to make sure it's correct as it comes in, right? But once everything kind of looks good, you most likely have an electronic backup that would, especially with things like medical information that's probably pretty important if you ever need to go back and see it. It's good to know that a lot of that stuff's being retained. And I think the banks go back many years now. Some are like 5, 6, 7 years, which is well beyond what most people need nowadays. So it's good to know what your bank does.
Yeah, and that goes back to the initial point of figure out what you need to save and what you're going to need to save it for. So, one idea is to keep a tax folder or tax box so that anything that would be needed for your tax return, just put it in that box. So that way, come January, February, you can organize that information and you're not searching through all of your files. The same thing with receipts where, maybe you're not someone who needs to save every receipt. You're only going to save those big ticket items if something breaks. So for repair for a washer or a new TV or a vacation, that big ticket item folder of just those receipts. And again, if you need to find something, you know where it is. And everything else you can kind of let go.
Oh, yeah, I agree. So I guess another important aspect of this is, especially with financial information, I just want to make sure we bring this up so they know for sure, is you want to make sure that certain items that you're getting rid of, you shred it, right? And you mentioned that at one point, but I just want to reinforce the fact that some stuff you really don't want to just toss it in the garbage. You really want to shred things that have any kind of personal identifiers, anything that might, because there still are people out there that, they go looking through dumpsters and they go through junkyards and places like that, and they find this stuff and it's amazing how much they can put together and, to try to get your identity or to try to steal banking information and things like that. So we have to be very cautious of that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And that's why with some of that maybe go electronic so they're not even getting a paper record that someone could find.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. So now that I've got, so I go through my house one thing at a time, and I think it's great. I know you feel this sense of accomplishment once you're done. And I guess, so I guess you have any ideas about, as far as like tools to make yourself a little bit more productive, right? Do you have any ideas about how we can be a little bit more just productive in general?
I mean, in this day and age, we have so many electronic apps on our phone and on our computer to work. But even if you're a paper person, there's nothing better than just, a small notebook and a calendar and a to-do list to keep yourself accountable. So even if you're making that to-do list or you're setting your goals and saying, by this end of the month, I'm going to do this, when you write it down, it sticks with you more. But again, there's so many apps with, on the phone, like we've talked about the electronic calendar, which can set up reminders for paying bills, different, setting up your goals as to when you want to complete things. There's a whole slew of different tools for to-do lists and keeping notes and keeping track of all your data, like with Evernote or OneNote. I love using the Gmail tools because everything is stored online, so you can access your data from wherever. But if you're concerned about that, just keep it home on a spreadsheet. One app that I love is LastPass, because nowadays, if everything is online and you have a password for different sites, how many of us use that same password and user ID for 10, 20 different sites? And then we hear you have a breach and department store X and your password there was leaked, and then these criminals try to use your same user ID and password on all different sites. So
right, and that's a password generator, right?
LastPass is a password generator, but also it secures it, so you only need to know your vault password, and then it remembers and keeps your passwords for all of your sites. And there's a bunch of other different companies that do that. LastPass is just the one that I like.
Yeah, well, that kind of answers that complaint about, wow, I can't remember all of my passwords, right?
Yeah,
so it kind of helps you with that.
Writing them down is not going to help.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a valuable tool. You're listening to Master Your Finances, and we're going to be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with John Odalen, and we're talking about getting organized. And John, you walked us through a great process about why this is important and the things that we should be trying to do. Now, this all sounds great. We're all at this point in time, we're kind of at home, and a lot of us are kind of doing a lot of introspective thinking, including maybe getting organized and taking care of ourselves. I know people are starting to work out at home and things like that. So this is probably a great time to be training ourselves and really kind of make where the rubber hits the road, right? So now we want to start doing this, right? And I kind of view this as a little bit like trying to go on a diet or trying to eat better and exercise, and trying to get organized kind of fits into that, right? Where you kind of know what you should do, but it's a little bit of work to get going. So you really need to get your momentum. So what are some of your thoughts about how to actually physically get started? And then how do we manage these items that we want to get, we really should be getting rid of, I guess?
Yeah, so getting started is sometimes the hardest part. So what I suggest is you really have to have a vision for what your space or your life is going to look like, and set a goal. You use losing weight as the example. A goal for losing weight is I'm going to lose weight. That's not really a goal. You want it to be a SMART goal where it's specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time bound. So you would say, I want to lose 10 pounds in the next month. So for your organizing goal, you want to say, I want to get the kitchen organized by the end of the month. Or maybe your longer goal is, I'm going to sell my house in 2 years. So I have to have shorter goals of tackling the garage and the basement and so forth within that. And if you set a goal, you write it down, you're more apt to follow through with it. I also suggest getting an accountability partner. Maybe a friend or a family member is doing the same thing at their house, and you can check in with them as you're working towards your goals.
So how would an accountability partner work? This is this is great. I mean, having support is always good. I know whenever you state a goal out loud, so to speak, you're much more likely to accomplish it, because now you kind of put it out in the universe, right? You're not just thinking about it internally. You say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Like you mentioned, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. And gyms are famous for this, right? They really, and these other weight loss places, basically they just make you accountable. They're going to set you up with somebody who you're going to call, whether you're trying to stop smoking or things like that. Having somebody you can reach out to when you're not necessarily moving forward like you'd like to move forward. So how does the accountability partner work out? How do they kind of make sure you're doing?
I mean, if you're working toward the same goal or similar goals, you have a periodic time to check in, whether it's every couple of days, every week, and kind of share your progress, so that that you can't let a week slide, and they're going to be a little hard on you to make sure that you're doing some progress. There's going to be backsliding, like with the diet, and that's okay, but you have to move forward. If your increments are 0, you're never going to get there. Even if your increments are small, eventually you will, empty the pool, or move that pile of rocks if you do a little bit at a time. If you're doing nothing, 0 plus 0 is always going to be 0.
That's true. That's true. And I remember when I first started like focusing on this a little bit more, is that one of the things I was like, hey, look, I just don't want to get worse, right? If there's too much stuff somewhere, I'm like, let me just make sure things don't get worse today. And then tomorrow I'll worry about making it better. So sometimes maybe the first day is just like, let's just not let it get any worse. So now you're setting up your goals, right? And now I'm going through my stuff. And I think part of the process we mentioned early on was some of these things are actually pretty nice. You might have some stuff that's really has some true value. It's still fully functioning. It's something that somebody somewhere could use. What do I do with these things? Whether it's clothes or furniture or china or things like that you may not really need anymore, but you don't want to just throw it out either.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of options to remove the stuff from your home to someone else who could use it. But time is always your friend, because the more time you have, the better opportunity you'll have to sell it or give it away. Obviously, there's always family and friends. That's the easiest thing to ask if they want something. If not, there's places to give it away to strangers. Craigslist has a free stuff page on their advertising section. There's FreeCycle. It's a great national organization with different local chapters where you post something for free and someone will come to your house and pick it up. Then, of course, there's always the charities, Goodwill, Salvation Army. In our local area, there's the Trenton Rescue Mission, and the Home Front. They will only take certain types of items that they can repurpose and use. One thing I want to say about that is when you're donating something, make sure that you're donating something of value that company can use. Because if you're giving them garbage, they have to pay to then get rid of it. Only donate something that if you were in a situation where you were shopping secondhand, you would buy it yourself. Ripped, torn clothing, pots that are seen their, well past their usefulness, they belong in the trash. And sometimes the trash is the appropriate place for the stuff that you have, if it can't be recycled. Lots of things can be recycled. There's companies that will recycle fabric and clothing, that can't be worn, and they'll do something with that. And again, there's always the sell route. You can sell things on Craigslist. Facebook has local yard sale groups. If you're doing a whole move, you can do an estate sale in your home. There's auction houses that, when I started this business, I thought auction houses meant Sotheby's up in New York with high-priced items. There are other local ones who will do regular household goods. You just need a little bit of time to look around and see what you can do with your items.
No, that's great advice. You mentioned that clothes can be repurposed. I used to be in the merchant marine on ships, and we used to get our rags, the big bags of rags, and they were actually old cut-up clothes. Mm-hmm. So, there's a purpose for all of this stuff, even if it's just turning it into rags for somebody in an industrial workplace that's going to use it to clean up oil spills and things like that. So yeah, no, that's great. So there's a use for a lot of this, and I think you're right. I know that charities sometimes, they appreciate people donating things, but we have to realize that the reason that they're going to be given to somebody, like the old suits I had, I know somebody was likely to be wearing those, so you want to donate it, and they were in good shape, so I'm pretty sure that they would do that. In fact, I think there's some places now that even they specifically try to help people get an interview and a job, and they set them up with dresses and suits and things like that to make them ready to go, basically get a job, right? So they look appropriate.
Yeah,
they might have been homeless or something before. Yeah, that's one of the right. Dress for Success is one. So there's a lot of really great charities out there locally that can kind of help you process that. And I think it's good you mentioned this free cycle. I hadn't heard of that before. I know that's so they'll basically take items that you don't necessarily want or need, and if you're just going to toss it, but it's still useful, they may just come and take it for you, correct? Is that my understanding?
Anything with the individual public. So, in our area, there's a Mercer Trenton list.
Okay.
And it's great for items that may not be able to go to a charity. Like a charity may not want a large sofa or a wall unit, but someone else can take that. So you're putting it out there anonymously, and then once you connect with someone, you make arrangements with them to come and pick it up or drop it off. It's great.
Well, that's fantastic. So, that's good. So we start small, right? We want to start the process. I think the key is to get going, right? Pick a place that's important to you, that you're going to feel the best results. Like you mentioned, the kitchen. I know me. If you're working, a desk is always a good place to start, right? Clear the desk off, and then take small victories, so to speak. Have an accountability partner, right? So now you kind of put it out there, and people know that you're actually working towards this, and then with these things that you're getting rid of, there's different things that you can do with them, right? And I think most of us are going to find out that we can get rid of probably a significant amount of our stuff and still be quite happy with what we have left, because we tend to accumulate a lot here.
We accumulate and we fill the space we have. When I work with clients, whether it's they're in a 2-bedroom apartment or a smaller house or a large house, it's always, I need more space. Well, you're filling the space you have, with stuff you probably don't need.
It sounds like George Carlin. Remember his skit? He had a skit about, why do we buy another house, bigger house? So we can put more stuff in it, right? And then we have to move, and we move to a bigger house to put more stuff in it.
Yes.
But then when we get older, right? And I think the trend seems to be people wanting less space, right? We tend to be using less space, especially as you age, right? The baby boomers are now older, and they don't necessarily want as much space as they used to have. So that's probably a good thing for their kids, right?
I pay for the larger space and the upkeep, and
Well, that's another. We didn't talk about that, did we? What about the storage spaces? You hear about people that have these storage facilities.
That's one of those things where, getting organized can save you money. I mean, if you're paying, storage spaces should only be short term. You're paying $100 a month for 3 years for a storage space. What's the stuff in there worth? That's one of my pet peeves of, clean that.
Oh, I agree.
Or bring it home, because, it's supposed to be for a short term, in between a move, or if there's, if you have a fire in your house, you need to put some stuff away. It's not but it's it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
It's one of the strongest growth areas in real estate, and has been for many, many years. And I don't know if anybody sees that ending in sight, because people are buying smaller apartments and building houses,
Right.
but then they find that they don't have enough room, so then they go rent a storage facility. But I think if they had your skill set, they'd realize they don't really need that facility, because it just isn't necessary. Most of this, as you're pointing out, most of the stuff that's probably in that facility is simply not needed, right? If you can't, you just don't need it. So
it goes back to right sizing. What is the right kind of stuff for your space and your life. Stuff that you used 20 years ago may not be part of your life today.
Absolutely. That's excellent. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here today, John? I really appreciate you helping us out.
And again, my company is Organize and Maintain, because you need to maintain what you've done. It's not just a one and done. If you've organized your closet, you need to keep up those great habits of, one in, one out on your clothes, or making sure that you file your papers regularly or put stuff away. You have to maintain it, because that will strengthen those new behaviors. So maintain.
Excellent, John. I think it's great advice, and I think it's a skill set that I know I'm trying to improve on, and I know that it really helps with lowering stress levels, and economically it helps. It just helps on lots of ways. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. You can listen to this podcast and all of them by going to masteryourfinances.us. And remember, together we can master your finances so you can enjoy financial peace of mind.